Hi, good morning. This is Damon Scott, Marketing Manager here at PBS. I'm joined with our VP of Sales and Marketing, Paul Scarpelli, today to talk about the Microsoft Dynamics 365 for government contractors. First, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Today, we're going to be providing an overview of the Microsoft Dynamics 365 for government contractors. Today's presentation will include a look at the executive dashboard. We'll also jump into the fully integrated web time and expense system. We'll also talk a little bit about project setup, including billing setup and managing funding. We'll also get into some invoicing and invoice formats, and we should have enough time. We'll also get into managing indirect rates. Okay. So as we're watching this, a little housekeeping to take care of real quick. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to our PBS YouTube account, which is PBS Dynamics NAV, later today. If you have any questions as we're going through the webinar, you can post those into the question section, and we will try to cover those as we go through the webinar. We'll also try to save a little bit of time at the end to cover some questions as well. However, if we cannot get to your questions for whatever reason, we will try to contact you separately. Also, later today, you should receive an email invitation to take a post-webinar survey. We really appreciate any feedback that you can give us to make this a better learning tool for everyone. So please take a few minutes. We really do appreciate that. The agenda for today's webinar includes a brief introduction about PBS, and then we're going to jump right into a demonstration of the product. Okay. So PBS, we are a top-tier Microsoft Business Solutions partner serving only the government contracting market. Our headquarters are just outside Washington, D.C. in Reston, Virginia. It gives us a unique access and insight into the GovCon community. Also, we're an experienced leader with over 15 years of success in the government contracting market and an intelligent innovator with Microsoft systems. So as a result, PBS is a direct resource for both government contractors and the Microsoft community. Now, the Microsoft Dynamics 365 that we're going to take a look at today, it's a rich, robust project accounting solution. It is DCAA compliant and tightly integrates the critical financial management components that government contractors need to manage their business. And the entire financial management workflow that government contractors require, such as general ledger, budgeting, reporting, business analytics, project accounting, are operated from within the solution without the need for a third party or add-on components. So, and in addition, it's also certified by Microsoft. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to our featured presenter, Mr. Paul Scarpelli. Paul?
All right. Well, thanks, Damon, and welcome to everybody on the call today. My background is in process reengineering and enterprise business systems, so I've been in that field for coming up on 30 years now, and I'm excited to give you guys a little insight into Microsoft Dynamics 365. So for some folks that are on the phone, you might have thought you were signing up for a webinar for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. NAV is one of the Dynamics 365 solutions. So Dynamics 365 is a cloud-based application from Microsoft to manage the full scope of your business. So everything from the business development side through operations and execution and finance aspects of your business. So Dynamics 365, the version based on NAV, they've got over 130,000 clients worldwide using it, with over 4,000 certified partners and 2 million licensed users, which makes it the most widely used mid-market business application in the world. And Microsoft has really seen tremendous growth in their cloud business. So anyone that follows Microsoft, the stock is right now at an all-time high, and also their cloud revenue is growing at an amazing pace. And it's the innovation that Microsoft is delivering that's helping that. And Microsoft's model is that they do everything through partners, and they feel like that gives the customer the best of both worlds. You've got the largest software company in the world making amazing cloud and mobile applications. Then you've got partners that focus on vertical industries. So these are some of the vertical industries that Microsoft has partners targeting, and PBS is specifically focused on the government contracting vertical. So when we talk about government contracting, we've got customers and prospects on the call that are in a lot of different industries. So government contracting for us includes not only professional services companies, so folks providing whether it's IT services or engineering services to the government, but also folks that are reselling products or manufacturing products for the government. So this solution is going to support all three business models. In addition, it'll support your commercial business or if you're doing work internationally. And I think that's one of the big differentiators, is it's a solution that really doesn't have boundaries to it. It doesn't force you into using different applications to manage different elements of your business. And that's what's, I think, really exciting for our clients, is that, the world is, in a lot of ways becoming smaller. You've got a lot of international opportunities, commercial opportunities, and for our clients, all of those are available to them using the Microsoft Dynamics 365 applications. So some areas of focus that Microsoft had in this latest release of 365 based on NAV is, one, an enhanced Office 365 experience. So Office 365 has been out for, I guess, probably about 4 or 5 years now, and has had tremendous uptick in terms of users. Microsoft is making it so 365 and NAV are working seamlessly together in a lot of ways. The back end of the application is on Azure, so it's working natively on the Azure platform managed by Microsoft. You can access it from more than just a local client today. So whether you have a desktop client installed or from a browser, tablet, now some incredible mobile capabilities, and we're going to show you a little bit of that today. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going on with Microsoft. And PBS, we're excited about, not only the things going on in the Microsoft world, but our parent, Extivia, has continued to make progress in expanding the products that we offer via Microsoft. So now any of the cloud solutions Microsoft offers can be offered through PBS, which is now an Extivia company. So exciting stuff going on for us today. So David, before we hop into things, if we can do a little quick poll to get an idea of who we have on the call today.
Sure. I'll put up a quick poll, Paul, while you're setting up the demo right now. Basically, just looking at what the business model, we talked about this kind of briefly, professional services, manufacturing goods, value-added resellers, just trying to get an idea of who we have on the call. And right now it looks like a lot of professional services, some mix of services and goods, some manufacturing, some R&D. It's good. So it looks like we're probably about 60% professional services, Paul, and just under 20% mix, about 5% on R&D, and split between the other manufacturing and value-added resellers. So.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's good, because we're going to focus a lot of our presentation today on the services side of the application. So if you do have some questions on inventory or manufacturing, we're happy to do a one-on-one presentation for you. Or the other thing we have is some additional webinars coming up. I think Damon's going to talk a little bit at the end, but we've got one on Microsoft Talent, which is an exciting new HRIS solution that we've brought on, and we've had great success with some of our existing clients already with it. All right, so let me give you a little bit of a quick overview of the application, and we'll talk about some of those different elements of the Microsoft Cloud Suite of products. So the first thing is, Dynamics NAV, again, is, now synonymous with Dynamics 365. So same product, whether you get it in the cloud or on-premise. What you're seeing here is, one of our standard role centers. So every user gets assigned not only a role, but also a security profile. And that profile helps to define what is available to the user from a security perspective, and then also what does the interface look like. So as an accounting manager, I'm seeing information like my cash flow trended over time. I'm looking at my personal timesheet information and expenses that we need to process. Now, they've already been reviewed in the field and approved, and now accounting is going to process them. Then over to the right, I'd call these are like my little shortcuts, right? So whoever has, when you log in the morning, whether you use Yahoo or MSN, you've got your favorites. And that's the idea here is these are my favorites, things I go to on a regular basis. So, contracts, so our IDIQs or BPAs, I got a list of my contracts in here. Projects where we're performing work, subcontract agreements, customers, etc. So each one of these just takes me to the detail, in this case, of my customer list. So I'm seeing all of my customers. You get just a quick snapshot of the current balance in that customer. Then over to the right, a little bit of some statistics, in this case, sales history. So I can see outstanding quotes that we have for this customer, or invoices that are being processed, invoices that have already been posted, outstanding balance. And I can drill into each of these numbers to get additional detail. So when I drill into the balance for this customer, I'm seeing all of the open AR, and in fact, it's color-coded for me to show me that in this case, a couple of these entries are overdue. And I can quickly get to the source document by just clicking Show Posted Document. And now this takes me over to that invoice that we initially generated and sent to the customer. I could resend it if needed, or reprint it in a very simple fashion. So the idea is make things at people's fingertips with that ability to drill down and get to detail. Because I think in today's world, there's so much information that's generated. I heard a presentation, it was probably about 3 months ago, and what they're talking about is the volume of data created has really expanded exponentially. And we're in a case where I think it was like over the last 3 years, half of the world's data has been created. And you see that a lot in these systems. And the challenge oftentimes is we create a lot of information. How easy is it to get it out? So this is one example of how we get that information out. Another example is if you think about how we work today, a lot of us are in email all the time. I'm getting emails on my phone. It seems like it never stops. So what Microsoft has decided to do is understanding that people live in Outlook so often that when I get an email, if it comes from a customer or a vendor, so there's a whole contact management system inside the application. So you can see we have customer lists, but we also have contacts of that customer. So anytime I have a contact, I'm going to go ahead and look up a contact, and you can see this customer, Department of Defense, I've got a contact, Mark Lahart. It's got his email attached to it. I've got his contact information. So what happens is when we get that email from an individual that's a customer, what you can do is look at details regarding that customer or vendor record. So in this case, Mark sends me an email and says, hey, can you send me some details of our open AR? I can click the Dynamics NAV tab instead of going over to Dynamics if I wanted to. And now what's going to happen is it's going to pull up all the details of, in this case, this customer's history. And you can see if I go back to inside of Dynamics 365 here, very similar look, right? So the same information that's available inside the application is now visible to me inside of Outlook. And including in that is that ability to drill down. So when we drilled into that balance before, you're seeing that same detail in terms of the entries. And as I get older, sometimes I need to make things bigger. So we'll go ahead and pop that screen out. And now that same kind of information that I had visible inside of the application is now available to me inside of Outlook. And similar concept of where if I want to pull up that invoice, click that Show Posted Document, here's that document, and I can reprint it or view it. So I can certainly move between tabs to get back, but then I'd have to search for the customer. So just making it simple to do those things. The other piece, when you think about information is, you aggregate all this data, and sometimes it's from more than one application. So most of our customers, they're using Dynamics for their core business. Sometimes they might use a different CRM than Dynamics, but oftentimes they're using, the CRM module. But there are instances where they maybe use a third-party payroll service or, some other third-party product. Well, Power BI is a dashboard tool from Microsoft that can bring all this data together. One of the things that makes it different for Dynamics is that Microsoft and PBS, we've built out a series of dashboards, reports, and data queries so you don't have to start from scratch. So see, these are some of the tiles that are standard views available to our clients. So this dashboard is a series of tiles that came from other reports. So I'm seeing, how are my rates trending over time, revenue by customer, cash flow, etc. Each one of these tiles, if I drill into it, it takes me into an underlying report. So that report underneath is giving me detailed information, in this case, revenue by customer, top projects, where the work is being performed. And if I select one of the tiles and I want to filter it, I can just click on Fort Belvoir, and now what happens is the other tiles, they reconfigure themselves. So now I'm seeing, in this case, Fort Belvoir, there's 2 projects that we have going on because those are color-coded in a darker blue or green, whatever color that might be. And it says cyber threat detection in Project 57. Fort Belvoir is located in Virginia. That's why you see that on the map. It narrowed down just on Virginia. So not only is that information available inside of the application, inside of Outlook, now Power BI becomes a place that I can visualize it easily. And Power BI is also embedded inside of Dynamics. So if you notice this top left-hand corner, all the reports that are available to me can be made available from my home page inside Dynamics. So I don't have to go to 2 places to access that. And I can still do, drill down or drill up depending on how that report was designed, to have that similar experience to Power BI. So, we're kind of blending across the different applications that ability to get to data, make good decisions, and also really be more proactive with finance giving real-time data to operations. The last place I'll go into is I talked about Microsoft's strategy around cloud and mobile, and I just want to give you a little glimpse into that mobile experience. A lot of companies talk about they have a mobile experience. One of the things that Microsoft did that's a little bit different is they made it where any of the forms can be available on a mobile phone. And what PBS has done is we've created a profile that's targeted towards, if you're a services company, things that your employees do on a regular basis. So if you think about it, most companies, as a services company, you might have 200 or 500 employees, but most of them are only entering time and expenses. So we've got a profile specifically targeted towards that. So whether you're on an Android or Apple device, your employees with their cell phone can enter time, create trip expenses, or other quick activities, request PTO, or approve documents. And I'm going to show you a little bit later on, the process to record time, and whether you have that experience from your cell phone or a browser, very simple experience and intuitive for the end users. So that's a little bit about, the overall elements to the application. And now I want to get a little bit into what I'll call like a day in the life. How do companies use this system on a regular basis? And maybe, Damon, do we have, maybe get an idea of what systems people on the phone are using? If we have a poll like that.
Yeah.
That way we can see, if we've got a bunch of clients, we can focus on some things that are new, or we've got folks that are maybe evaluating this.
Absolutely, Paul. Yeah, I just threw up a quick poll here for everyone on the webinar. Just real quick, what kind of accounting solution is your company currently using? Delta, CostPoint, I don't know if there's any GCS Premier customers out there.
Well, they're popping up.
Are they popping up?
Okay.
Yeah, of course, we know that's no longer supported, so we do have a lot of folks converting over from that. QuickBooks or ProCraft or others. I see a lot of others on there, which is interesting.
Yeah, so right now we've got about 15% CostPoint users, 30% GCS Premier users, 7% QuickBooks. We don't have any ProCast ones, and over 60% other. I'm curious what the other ones are.
Yeah.
So that's great. So that gives you that's a good idea. You know, we've got, it looks like about 40% of the folks are 35 using Deltek, and a big chunk using other today. All right, so let's get a little bit into you know, kind of that day in the life of how people are using the system and some of the capabilities that I think are big differentiators. So, you know, again, I go to the list, you know, I pull up the list of all my projects. Let me pull the first one. We'll talk a little bit about a cost plus fixed fee project. So you've got different tabs of information. And then over to the right, I've got the status box. So if you remembered earlier from that customer card, you know, that status box or the detail box, it's giving me information about the record I'm on. So earlier we were on a customer record. Now we're on a job or project record, and showing information specific to this job. So total contract value, funding, revenue, billings, AR, commitments, etc. So each one of those numbers is a drill down. So before we were on the customer record, we were looking at AR against the customer. Now this is saying you've got about 86,000 in AR for this particular project. You know, and I can do the same thing where I drill into it, pull up the original invoice, reprint it if needed by just going ahead and clicking the print button. We'll show you some of those different formats later. But the idea is history never goes away, and we keep it in detail, so you can always reprint things and get to that information. You've got some notes you can take. We've got a FAR clause list. So whether it's FAR, DFAR, or CAPS clauses, you can identify, you know, what clauses are particular to that contract, and which ones might flow down to your subcontractors that are performing work there. Other things that you can do is you can create links of documents. So whether you're linking it to, you know, a server, or you might be linking it to, you might be also using SharePoint, right? So both those options are available, but the idea is any kind of document, you can associate it. So whether, you know, it's an email, if you're using SharePoint, you can drag and drop an email, or it's a file attachment that might be the original contract. In essence, go to one place to get all of your information. So now on the left-hand side, there's job setup. You know, it's giving me details about the customer we're performing the work for. If I go to the posting tab, this is all the financial setups. So everything from how do we recognize revenue, how do we bill. In this case, it's a cost type project. So this billing pool group setup comes into play. This is where we're telling the system, as it relates to recovery of our indirects on this project, how is it defined? So you could use your corporate rate structure, or you could have an example like this one where we're saying, hey, we're not able to recover any G&A on travel because that's how that contract or that task order was issued. The fee that we earn, fee amount is if you have fee on hours and any kind of withholding. So those are setups that you can reuse at any point. On the contracting tab, we've got information like the primary contract number, contracting office, and paying office. And anytime you see that the three dots, that's a lookup to another list. So in this case, I'm looking up over to my contract list, and on that contract list, I'm going to have additional details like, you know, what is the contract vehicle the work is being performed under? Is it a GSA, you know, or other agency contract vehicle? Is there any kind of IFF, so your industrial funding fee associated with it? So if you need to track that fee and report on it, and you want to get a real-time view of it, you can track that fee. If you're selling products, you can have a product catalog. If it's services related, you can have your services pricing built into it. One of the things that you're going to see about pricing throughout the application is it's all date sensitive. So I don't need to remember to go back in and say, on January 5th of 2019, let's just go ahead and let's put the next year in here just to show you how easy it is to create an entry. So I can say 1/5 of 19, you know, maybe the rate goes from 220, and let's just say it goes up 10%. So I'm going to put 220 in there. I'm going to say times 1.1. It's going to do the math for me and say, okay, next year, this is going to start billing at $242 an hour. So I can set up those rates in advance. System's going to automatically calculate the right billing rate based on the period that the person entered time. So this is if I had a T&M particular project that we're performing work under. So you're really making it simple for people to do their job on a daily basis. That's kind of one of our core focuses. Make it easy to get the information, make it simple for the end users, and truly an integrated real-time experience for all users. So when you think about it, that's the levels. I've got the contract underneath that. We're performing work underneath with this job. And then at the lowest level is this work breakdown structure, or WBS. So the WBS allows me to have multiple levels underneath any particular task. So it's a 60-character alphanumeric field. So whether you're going 10, 15 levels down, it's not a problem. This WBS is used, for 4 key purposes. So number one is I'm defining that structure, and I'm telling the system, giving a little description of what that level is. So you can see that, I've got my Dynamics NAV task, and I've got labor beneath that, and then I've got some materials. We've got some online training. So different tasks that are set up. Each one of these tasks, it can be used for recording labor. It can be used for recording expenses, purchase orders, or requisitions. So when you check the box, this means that, yes, this is available for time, but this task called labor is not available for expense reports. That's the first thing, is it's identifying what I'm charging to. The next is the membership. So membership, the way to think about this is your labor workforce. So it's where I'm telling the system who can charge to this task. So I've got a list of employees that can charge. One of the things that I think is really exciting is that it's not only identifying who can charge, but also when they can charge. So in this case, Samuel Morris, who I have highlighted, he only can see that charge code from September 1st through April 30th, so 2017 to 2018. Everybody else, if they don't have that filled in, they can see the task for whatever that period of performance of that task is. So, you don't have to worry about adding people on and off, when that date hits. The system will automatically do it for you. The next is the approval hierarchy. So time, expense, requisition, approval hierarchies. And then finally, everything around funding. So we can identify contract and funded value at any level of the WBS. We can map that to an Akron or CLIN. And this is going to have detail underneath of it. So again, I can drill into that $6.2 million in funding, and you'll see all the history here of any mods. So the mods could be, a funding mod, a contract mod, could be a mod for a POP. So this is my mod history. If I needed to make a new mod, I would just click my new button, and we could say like mod for PM LCAT, additional 50K. And then the effective date, if I put T in, it knows that's today's date, and we'll just say it's 50,000. And if you use Control-C and Control-V, you can copy and paste. I could put the fee amount in there. I could send this off to Excel and actually do the work in Excel. So the integration with Excel allows me to send things to Excel and actually update them in Excel and feed them back into the system. It's not even a copy and paste, it's just a refresh. And it would actually look to make sure that I didn't violate any of the business rules even. So I just recorded at the detailed level, and then what you'll see is it rolls it up to this top level. So this is now 7.8 and 6.8 million. And we can go back to that work breakdown structure. You're going to see that charge code now is 6.325 million. So I can record those mods at the detailed level. System automatically rolls them up for me. Oftentimes people ask here about, other documents, so linked documents. So I can actually, same concept, right? So if I got the email from the COTAR, I could actually take that email and drag and drop it if I was using, the SharePoint document management piece inside of Dynamics. Or I could link a document. So really making it easy for people to, do their day-to-day task and also manage those associated documents. All right, so that's a little bit about the setup on a cost-type project. Talked a little bit about the work breakdown structure. I want to spend a couple minutes on this budgeting setup. So within the budgeting, this is what allows me to build an unlimited number of budgets. So I could have my baseline budget, maybe an ETC budget. A couple different things that I think are unique here. One, this import-export from Excel. If you want to do things in Excel and bring them back in, you can do it. We've got some functions that allow you to, automate that building of the budget. So I can build the budget from actuals. So the idea being, if I have that rolling forecast for 2018, I could say I want to create a budget, and for the first, I guess we're in July now, so I'll say from 1/1 to 6/30, I want to copy the actuals in, and I want to copy it to, I'm going to put a new 2018 ETC budget. And then what this would allow me to do is actually take those actuals that have been processed and bring them into a budget that is actuals for the first 6 months, and I want to forecast maybe those next 6 months out. So some really nice tools to be able to build a budget and not have to do all the manual steps. All right, so other things on the project, we can set funding limits. So the system automatically takes the funding limits that we had for contract and funded value, but I could also set other funding limits. So you might call them caps, right? So if I needed to cap my G&A rate, at $25,000, or I needed to cap travel on airfare for a certain amount on a task. So those caps allow me to, manage any of those billing ceilings and automate that effort to make sure that we don't go over those caps. All right, so that's a little bit about project setup. I want to take a step back because we talked a little bit about budgeting, and I want to talk, I think this is a big thing for companies. They always talk about, how do I perform what-if analysis for the company? So we talked about budget. I'm going to spend a few minutes to talk about building a forecast. So the idea of building a forecast is something that people have often done in Excel because Excel has some good tools for what-if analysis, and now we've brought those capabilities back into Microsoft Dynamics. So the idea here is that I can identify a model where I want to build that forecast. So in this case, I've got this Oasis model that I want to build. From here, what I'm going to do is I can identify, one, the periods of time that people, are charging to. So the idea is, January, month one is January, and there's a total of 176 hours. And I can have different models for different divisions or projects. So if you have a group of projects that people work, Tuesday through Saturday, you could have different periods in the number of hours available. Or if they're working, 3/12s or whatever your scenario is, you can build a different calendar model. So once I identify the calendar, then I'm identifying the labor that's going to work on this project. So it could be existing employees. So in this case, John Rowell is an existing employee. It identifies what his salary is, or I could have people we haven't hired yet. So I've got a software analyst labor category code, and we project we're going to pay about $57,000 for that kind of resource. So I'm planning in this forecast both existing resources and potentially future hires. I can plan out my trips in here. So if you just budget travel by month, you can do it. We've got some clients that actually budget X number of trips over periods, so you can also do that. Once I identify the labor in the trip plan, then I can build out the detailed plan. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm on there as one of the folks on the project. I'm going to go ahead and remove myself, and I'll just show you, from a day-to-day practical use how it would be done. So I just choose the labor category code that I'm planning. In this case, because I chose a labor category code that I was tied to, it just brought me in. And I'll say I'm going to be full-time. So staff multiplier would be 1. It's just going to be me on this project. And then how many hours am I going to be in January? So am I going to be a full-time, or we'll just say they're going to be 75% of the time working on this January of 2019 forward. So once I put in my level of effort in that period, what it does is it looks to see how many hours were available. So it takes that 0.75, multiplies it by the number of available hours, and came up with 132 hours available for me. And it's going to apply my labor rate, the burdens to that based on my cost. So I can build out this plan, and you can have multiple forecasts or plans for any individual project. And then once I build it, we've got a series of reports that are available for you to try to analyze how you're performing. So let's go ahead and we'll go over to our report list. Okay, if I can get to the right one. One second. I think it might have logged me out.
Here, while you're working on that,
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and throw up another poll real quick
thanks,
here.
Damon.
And we've talked about a lot of different things for the Microsoft 365 and what it can do for your company. So just as a matter of opinion, just a quick poll on what the main areas of focus that you're looking for in a new system for improvement. So as we've got that out there, go ahead and select whether you're integrating other systems, some reporting information that you're looking for, automation of manual tasks, or compliance. And again, you can select all that apply. And as we're going through the responses here, a lot of integration, just about everyone on reporting.
Okay. I guess I'm on the right thing.
You're on the right track.
Yeah, I need to click the right button. So it looks like we got about 75% voted. We'll just give them another 10 seconds. But it looks like reporting, closely followed by compliance. So it looks like about 80% are concerned with compliance, and 78% automation of manual tasks. So it sounds like they want an integrated system. You know, that's why they only have 35% there. So it looks like we got about 80% that voted. Let's go ahead and we'll flip back here. So after you take a vacation, I just got back from vacation a couple weeks ago, I forgot the right workspace to go to. So I'm on there now, and so now you're seeing, once you build those plans, and we've got these different reports and dashboards that can give me a projection of, you know, planned revenue, planned profit, cost, etc. And one of the things that I really like is that I can set different kinds of filters. So in this case, I'm looking at all projects, but if I want to look at just one of these projects, what does it look like? When I select the project, now it's showing me just for that project. We've got other filters that you can set. So within any kind of view, like if I look at planned profit, this is showing me my planned profit over time, and it's looking at all projects. You can have projects that are not only active projects, but you could have some that maybe are in the planning stage. We haven't won it yet. So I can set this filter and say, I want to look at probability. In this case, I've got some that are 75% probability to win, and some we're active on. So if I say, if we don't win those projects, what does the business look like? You know, now you can see that we've got a drop in profit based on us not winning those new projects. So same concept from a revenue, cost, hours, also utilization. So if we win those new projects, what does utilization look like then? So I can go from saying, you know, I've got just the active ones. If we win those new projects, okay, here's the impact on utilization. And then same thing on your indirect rate forecast. I hear lots of CFOs talk about this, which is, okay, if we build this new building, what happens to my rates? Or if we add on 10 more resources in this project, what happens to my rate structure? So you can do that same type of thing here, where I'm identifying if we win or don't win new projects, what's the impact on my rates? You know, I've got a G&A rate of 153%. we're not going to be very competitive. We need to win other projects to bring those rates down. That's a little bit about the forecasting and that what-if analysis. So let's get back to our project planning. So we talked about, winning new projects, analyzing the what-if analysis. So now we've got a project we've already won. We've set everything up in the system. Now let's talk a little bit about, we're going to collect some time and expenses, and we'll go through that whole billing process. And go back onto my home page. You can see that right there I've got my timesheet. I just click onto my 28 hours. It drops me into my current period timesheet. This timesheet could be both weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly. You can have a configurable timesheet, so there's no limits in terms of how that timesheet is laid out. You can set favorites. So the idea of favorites is that if I have certain projects that I'm working on all the time, so let's go ahead, and we were talking about that acoustic kitty project. So if I'm working on this and this is the charge code I'm typically on, I picked the wrong one here, so it allows me to default my labor category code, so every time I log in, it's going to drop that project and task onto my worksheet for me. So then on a daily basis, I'm just going in and recording my time. The system has certain controls in place, so if I try to charge to a direct project, so today is Thursday, let's just say I try to charge 4 hours, it's giving me an error saying, hey, future time is not allowed on this project. However, you can see I've got PTO charged to tomorrow, because for PTO I can have that charged in the future. So what a user is typically doing is they're going to go in, record their time for the day, save it, and that's what they do on a daily basis. So very simple for a user to do it. If they made a change to a previously saved cell, it's going to require a comment. So some of those DCAA specific requirements around electronic timekeeping systems. You can see that experience is very simple for a user, easy for them to do those things on a regular basis. So let's go over to our phone experience, and let's do the same thing on a cell phone, and we'll give you guys a little idea of what it's like for a user to use their phone to record time. So this is a different user. I'm logging in as user 4, and they have 16 hours in their timesheet. When I drop down into my list, here's their the charge codes they use for the current period. Same idea with favorites work. It drops me into today and says, okay, I haven't entered any hours for today. I can swipe back and look at previous days or look at hours by days. Let's go into yesterday, and you can see they haven't entered their time for yesterday. So we'll go ahead and enter their time for yesterday. We drop into their timesheet. It puts me into yesterday's date. Go ahead and enter my hours, and that would be the process for a user. So really simple for someone with their mobile device to record their time. So now, there's really no reason for them not to record their time. Very simple for them to do those things on a daily basis. They could also put comments in here. Same idea would go into previous periods, etc. So just simple for users to do the things that they do on a daily basis. If they also need to record, the next thing we'll talk about a little bit is expenses. So if you're out to lunch with somebody and you wanted to remind yourself that you need to record that on your expense report, what you can do is I can pull up my phone, same idea, it drops me into today, and I'll just say, after this, I'll have lunch with Damon. We'll go out to lunch, and we'll just say we're going to spend about $40. And then I can identify the expense category code that it goes to. So we'll put it to meals. And now I can just click this has receipt button, and it's going to pop up my camera on my phone. And now I can take a picture with my phone. So now I'm going to have that reminder inside of Dynamics that, here is that lunch menu. I got to make sure I code it correctly. So once I record that expense, it would automatically be available on my trip expenses. So let me go over to my expense report. So go over to expenses, and then on my trip expenses for that user you would see, that lunch meeting, and then they could just code it. What project did it go to? So this was maybe a G&A expense. And then it defaults it for me, but I could override whether I was using the company card or I use my own personal, or it could be a personal item that's company paid. And you can see this one has checked, it has a receipt, so I could actually, pull up that expense receipt right here. If you wanted to import your charges from a credit card, you could also import the charges and code it. So, again, just making it easy for someone to record time and expense. If you think about most of your employees, that's what they do on a daily basis. We need to make it simple for them to do that. If you had an expense for a full trip that you took and you wanted to record that based on per diem, we could come in and there's a whole per diem wizard. So we'll just say that I had a visit to existing client in Alabama. If I received an advance, I can enter that. Identify the period I was there. So let's just say I was there from the 17th through the 21st. Then the per diem wizard would just take me through a series of questions so I could identify where I went to. And we'll go ahead and pick the county. When I was there, so it defaults it from that 17th to the 21st. But if I went to two different places, I could split that week. We'll click next. It automatically checks all the meals and incidentals, elements, and lodging. Then I would just identify what project I was traveling for. So we'll just go ahead and pick a project. Post-implementation. Identify lodging and meals. What are the codes it goes to? It tells me my lodging ceiling, so I just enter my actual lodging, enter my tax, click finish, and then it creates my expense report for me. So it's going to have my first day meals, my lodging tax, the first day and last day at 75%, and the remainder of the days at that full rate. So, really making it easy for people to record time and expenses and being able to do it from different devices. So now we've recorded those time and expenses, and now let's go through that process for how are we going to process time and bill it. So the processing of labor, what happens is typically clients are going to run their missing time report to make sure we can get everybody's time in. System has automated alerts to let them know if somebody didn't record time from the prior day. It can email a reminder to them, remind them to submit their time at the end of the payroll period. So those things are, defined by you, and if you want to turn it off for somebody, you can do that. But just, again, that light touch to get people to remember to record their time. At the end of the timesheet period, once you've got everybody's time approved, you would just run this get approved time function. And what this does is it'll bring all that approved time into the labor distribution journal, and then you would just calculate. You'd calculate your labor distribution. If you're doing payroll in-house, you would just process it with that posting routine, and it moves it over to payroll. And Dynamics has a payroll module to do all your payroll. If you outsource, we've got integration with ADP, Paychex, Payroll Network, Paycom. So if you're using one of those folks, we've got standard integration there. If you have subcontractors that use your time entry system, you can actually create a subcontractor invoice from that time that was recorded, and it automatically updates your subcontract agreements that have already been set up. So these subcontract agreements can define, what kind of subcontract costs you've committed to, the total amount of costs you committed to, and as you process that labor, it automatically updates not only what's been obligated, but when you post that purchase invoice, you'll have expended that particular amount. So, not having to rekey things, defining up front the amount of, in this case, labor by labor category code with caps potentially in there, but integrated from subcontracting through purchasing through time entry. So all those three places working together. And then on all of these documents, one of the things to mention is we've got workflow approval that's available to you. All right, so I've got two last things to do. We're going to cover allocations, and then we'll cover the billing side. And I think we had one more quick poll. Do we have one more poll?
Sure.
And then we'll get through those last two things and
we've got about
questions.
Yeah, about 8 minutes left here on the webinar. So real quick, we've talked about a lot of different Microsoft products. Obviously, the Office 365, Outlook being integrated into the system, SharePoint and Excel, or other products that your company currently uses that are Microsoft products. We know a lot of accountants love Excel, as do I.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and it looks like we got just about 50% of the votes in already, and it's about 100% on Excel and 100% on Outlook. So it's interesting. A lot of folks still using that. Roughly 75% on Office 365.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I remember it was probably around 50% or less.
Years ago.
Yeah. So it's certainly
a lot more folks. Absolutely.
All right. Excellent. All right. So so before we go through the billing process, we just
had a few more votes.
Okay. All right.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and send this back over.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So before we go through the billing process, I want to talk a little bit about the indirect rate setup. So this setup is going to be as simple or as complex as your business. In our demo example, we've got a fringe pool, overhead, company site, client site, subcontract material handling, and G&A. So I want to take one of the pools and talk a little bit about the capabilities here. So the setup, it really requires, three key steps. So one is you define your structure. And the key here is that the sequence needs to be done in a way that if you have any intermediate pools or service centers, that waterfall setup needs to be defined so that in this case, fringe, that got calculated in step one, a portion is going to go into these overhead pools and a portion into G&A. So that fringe pool needs to be above the overhead and G&A pools. The next step is once I define the structure, then I'm telling the system for each of the pools, how do I accumulate the cost? And then finally, how do I allocate it would be the next step. So the accumulation, I'm just telling the system this particular pool is an accumulation of all of our overhead accounts for our client site departments. And then our base is our direct labor with fringe applied at actual for those same particular departments. So once I define that rate setup, the system is going to do the allocation for me. And then whether it's an intermediate pool or a final pool would be defined in this step. So once the cost is accumulated, I'm using that base to determine what portion is going to go to a project. I'm doing it at both actual and provisional rates. So the actual rates is just the actual calculation, the math of I've got overhead costs I've accumulated, I've got direct labor for particular departments, that's going to be my basis to determine what percentage they get. And then the provisional rate, it's going to take that rate times whatever my base is, and then that's going to do the allocation based on a provisional rate. And again, this is date sensitive, so you can have your rates over time, both provisional rates and final rates. So once you get your final rates identified, as part of the invoicing process, you can produce your final invoice based on that final rate. So that incremental final invoice, you don't have to do the calculation offline. System can calculate it for you and actually produce it. While I'm here, I just want to touch on this real quick. The financial report writer inside of Dynamics is called account schedules, and what we have is we've got certain incurred cost schedules that we've predefined with the account schedule routine. So it can build your schedules A through H. There's a wizard that'll take you through that process that asks you a series of questions to allow you to build that incurred cost schedule for you. And then there's an export over to Excel if you want to send that off to Excel and complete the other schedules. And we're also working on additional schedules as we go. So that's a little bit about your cost pool setup. And then the allocation, there's an allocate cost routine that's going to take those costs and allocate them out to the individual projects. Throughout time, it's doing it at that provisional rate and actual rate. And then once you have the final rate from the government, you can run it based on final rate. All right, so the last thing we're going to cover, Damon, is we're going to talk a little bit about the invoicing process, and then we'll leave a couple minutes for questions. So generation of invoices, you'd run that create invoice function. You can run it for one or multiple projects. Each project can have more than one set of invoice groups potentially. So the idea is, if you invoice all tasks on one invoice, you probably just have a monthly invoice that is encompassing all tasks. But you could invoice by task order, or you could have a group of task orders that go under one invoice. It defaults it to last month, but I can identify the period in case you don't bill monthly. And then I say okay, and what it does, it creates what we call an invoice proposal. So the invoice proposal would get reviewed, and then you can send it off for approval. And then once it's approved, whatever your approval hierarchy is, it becomes a posted invoice. And that posted invoice, you're going to have it throughout time, and I can always reprint it. So when I go to print it, we've got different options of how you print it. So whether you want to include your subcontract labor with the direct labor, or you want to split it out, whether you want to roll your indirects in the direct section, we've got a way you set up your tasks so you can seamlessly roll those indirect costs into the direct section, and then you'd have just the loaded rate plus the fee. Whether I want to print my labor by labor category code or resource name, the level I want to roll the invoice up to, or subtotal by task, then I can just send that off to PDF, Word, or Excel, or schedule it. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll open up this invoice. So you'd have your logo. In this case, we've got the detail on labor, current period, inception, and date. I've got other direct costs, the burdens that have been applied, any kind of withholding, total for the invoice. So I can always get back to that detail. And then just the last thing I'll mention, and then we'll open it up for questions, is that we also have, as part of that, if you use the government voucher, so the 1034 and 1035, those are also options in terms of, printing invoices on the government form. So similar level of detail we're going to show in this case. The cover page is going to be at a little higher level, and then you'll have that detail underneath of it. So that leaves us with a couple minutes for questions. So
we have about 1 more minute, Paul, actually. So
okay.
If you want to get through some of those real quick, maybe on the high-level questions, so we can get through. We go back out to some of the other questions as well.
All right. Yeah, sounds good. All right. So I'm just going to take the questions from the top. So the first question on here is, what size services companies is this solution ideal for? So for companies that are professional services based, the head count is typically anywhere. We start with companies that are probably around 50 to 60 employees, up to we've got clients that are upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 employees on the Dynamics 365 solution. And then there's another Dynamics 365 product for companies that are even bigger. So, pretty wide range of companies that use it. Second question is around cost. What is the cost from the software and implementation? That one's a little more difficult because it's based on the kind of license model. So for that individual person, we'll follow up with you. But just to give you an idea, if you're doing a subscription, subscriptions today can be as low as $800 to $1,000 a month, and it's really dependent on the number of employees you have. And that looks like we got time for one last question. And then the question is on here: do you guys have migration tools to migrate us from GCS Premier? We've done over 100 GCS Premier migrations, and we've got tools that allow us to stage data in Excel in case you wanted to make changes to your chart of account structure or project structure, and then imports to upload them. So I know there's other questions, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. It looks like we just went over by a minute, but I want to thank everybody.
Absolutely.
And I think we've got, like Dan mentioned, a post-webinar survey.
Yep.
And then also, I think next month.
Yeah, August 23rd, it's on our event page at pbbs.net, HR system.
Yep.
So Microsoft Dynamics 365 Talent.
Yep.
For HR, we'll be premiering that, and I think that'd be pretty exciting. So again, thanks for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.